Welcome back. Sorry about that. To the CBB Review Studio podcast. I am Dan Siegel, joined as always by my co-host Mat Mlodzinski and Ben Anderson. Here we are on February 5th, where I want to say we are 5 weeks from Selection Sunday. 5 weeks, or I guess since we were doing this on Monday, less than 5 weeks technically. So the bubble watches, the bracketology, it's kind of getting like into crunch time, and we're going to discuss everything that went on this past weekend. I mean, there were some banger games, like 4 or 5 of the best 15 to 20 matchups of the season happened this past weekend. So we're going to get into all that. Let's get started, though, as we start every episode with our weekly winners and losers. And I'll head over to Ben first for this one. So, Ben, what is your weekly winner?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go over to the SEC for mine. Their middle tier of the league has sort of separated itself into the way it needed to, in my opinion, for them to get the maximum amount of bids to the NCAA tournament. And I think you had to find wins if you were those middle tier teams. And 2 in particular, Florida and Ole Miss, certainly did that. Ole Miss defeated Mississippi State in the first round of the Egg Bowl, which I'll get more in depth into in the around the conferences section. And then Florida had a huge win against Kentucky. And those are the type of victories that really show promise when it comes to the NCAA tournament. And I think that at the cost of Mississippi State, the SEC is probably going to get the maximum amount this year, which they should be pretty happy about.
What about you, Matt? What's your winner?
Yeah, I'm having fun with this one. I'm going guys who wear rec specs, and I think we can all see where I'm going with this. Robbie Avila, and Indiana State taking down Drake in a huge Missouri Valley game. Those are the top 2 teams in the Missouri Valley. It's a packed Missouri Valley conference. I want to give respect to the Belmonts, the Southern Illinois with Xavier Johnson. There are a lot of good teams, good basketball teams in this conference. Only 2 tournament-worthy teams, and Indiana State showed why they are worth it, and Robbie Avila was the main reason why. He's fun to watch. He wears the rec specs. He doesn't look like a basketball player. And this is no offense to him, because the guy would drop and he'd beat me 21-0 in a game of one-on-one. I couldn't do anything about it. He'd probably beat half the guys in his conference one-on-one. This guy is great. He's great for college basketball, honestly. Like, there's no other way to put it. He's the face of mid-major basketball.
Yeah, I can't wait till, I guess, like March Madness season when Indiana State's in and he just becomes everybody in America's favorite player, and Indiana State, the way they run their offense, becomes everybody's favorite Cinderella team. Hopefully they make a run. It seems like a little imminent that they go to the Sweet 16 or something, but I guess we're on it a month early because that's what we do here. But moving on to my winner, I'm going to stay in the SEC with Ben. I'm going to go with Lamont Paris and South Carolina, because what he has done at South Carolina is essentially Coach of the Year worthy. We talked about it on the last episode. He was picked to finish, 13th, 14th, definitely in the basement of the SEC, the Gamecocks. And even as early as before this week, the Gamecocks were not getting enough respect. They were unranked in the AP poll. But they respond this week with road wins against Tennessee and Georgia, and now with South Carolina at 19-3, 7-2 in the SEC. It's getting to the point where you could just no longer disrespect them, no longer have that preseason bias against them. It is way too late for that. South Carolina is simply a good team. They've beaten Kentucky as well, and even their 3 losses aren't too bad, because you look at everybody in the teens of the AP poll, everybody has their losses. And the fact that South Carolina has such a great record, I think, speaks for itself. So I think it's fair to say we were just all wrong about them, and that it's a clear National Coach of the Year candidate, or even favorite at this point. So that's the win. That's my winner. But moving on to the losers, we'll send it back over to you, Ben.
Yeah, my loser today is Creighton. And it might seem a little odd given that they went 1-1, so it's not a terrible week or anything like that. But the Butler loss is just so disappointing, in my opinion. They gave up 99 points to a bubble team. Like, it's not a bad team by any means, but give up 99 in what felt like a pretty good stretch, a 4-game win streak, and to end it like that, it's a little bit disappointing, especially when you look at how they lost the game. Only the core 4 in Creighton, Alexander, Sharman, Ashworth and Kalkbrenner combined for 94 of the 98 points. And typically that kind of depth or lack of depth, therefore, doesn't really bode well for March, in my opinion. So I'm a little bit worried to see what Creighton looks like by the end when everyone's a little bit fresher than them. And just every time I want to buy into Creighton, they do something like this and give up 99 to Butler. And it makes me a little bit less inclined to trust anything that comes out of Omaha this year.
Yeah, Creighton, a definite loser. Shout out to Butler, though, because they are now worthy of being talked about. We actually have a bubble segment we'll do later on the show. We'll discuss Butler in greater depth. But I'm going to throw it back to you, Matt, for your loser of the week.
Yeah, my loser, and I'm going to try to get some interaction here. So I know we got some viewers right now. Make sure to comment on this. Let me know what you think. Mountain West top 25 stands. And I say this because a lot of people, myself included, believe that the Mountain West is a 6-bid league. I think you have 5 very strong teams. At this point, Nevada might need another Q1 win or so on the rest of their slate, and they've probably just got to keep on winning. But you've got some great teams between Utah State, San Diego State, New Mexico, which is one of my favorite teams heading into the year, Boise State, and what am I missing? I'm missing one. Colorado State.
Yeah, there you go.
Those are the 5. Nevada's kind of on the bubble right now. But unfortunately, the way last week played out with a lot of these teams kind of playing each other, they all kind of beat up on each other, just like the Big 12. And what do we have now? We have 2 teams that are ranked, but no teams inside the top 20 in the Mountain West. And for me, that's a little bit of a shame. I believe that the Mountain West should have 1 team at least inside the top 20. It's too good of a conference to have their highest ranked team at 22nd in Utah State. That just doesn't sit well with me. And I do have to put up one comment right here because Ariel's loser of the week is me. And this, you know what? Like at this point, I'm rooting for Kansas State because I know that he's a Kansas guy and that just provokes that. So I wish I would have changed my loser of the week to Ariel, but it's staying with the Mountain West stands.
You know, sometimes it's called cannibalism. It's so funny with John Rothstein, right? Sometimes he's like, oh, like all these teams in this conference are beating up on each other. Mountain West, it's cannibalism. And the ACC just makes them look like a bad conference. Just the perception is so crazy. I'll dig into that more. But I'm actually, for my weekly loser, I'm digging into the A10 and a game that I was actually live for before I was just watching all these, the evening tier of all these great games that we'll get to. I was at the noon tip-off between UMass and George Mason, kind of like a insignificant upper middle tier A10 matchup, whatever. But just the ending of this went absolutely viral. I'll explain it if you did not see it. So it was a pretty hard-fought, close game throughout. And then the final seconds of the game, UMass found themselves up 2. There was a wild scramble for the ball. It finds the hands of George Mason's Baraka Okajoy, and he drives to the rim for a layup, ties it up at 65. There are about 2 seconds left. So we're thinking, okay, another collapse by UMass. It's overtime. UMass just inbounds the ball to UConn legend Rasul Diggins for what would be a desperation 3/4 court heave in a tie game. Somehow, Keyshawn Hall or George Mason intentionally fouls Diggins with 1 second left in a tie game. Diggins makes the free throw to win, and that was just like the most boneheaded decision, like probably number 1 on SportsCenter, not top 10 plays level bad. Hall did have 23 points in this game, so I guess if it had to happen to someone, it's best to happen to him because he just has been balling this year, but that's just a brutal loss and a A10 basketball in a nutshell, basically, if you want to put it that way. But enough about the A10. Let's get into all these other wonderful conferences. So what week are we on here? Week
14.
14, yeah. Here, I'll put that up there. Week 12 coming up. Week 11 scores. Anyway, I'll start with just at the top here. So we got TCU and Texas Tech. Both teams ended up losing their weekend games. So I guess it's the game in the midweek slate kind of becomes a little bit less relevant, but just how it works in the gauntlet of Big 12 play. Like I'm fine calling that cannibalism and just like, oh, like whatever. It's still a great conference. Both tournament teams. We saw your average Pop Isaacs day, 25 points on 18 attempts, 11 3-point attempts. That's just an entertaining guy, someone who just puts up a crap ton of shots. And still not enough. TCU was hotter from 3, and TCU beats Texas Tech. So that's that game. But I'll open the floor first to Ben and then to Matt for any of the other 6 if you want to discuss.
Yeah, generational stat line performance for Joe Toussaint, 9 assists and 8 turnovers. Rarely see that type of one-to-one assist to turnover ratio, and especially in a high-level game like this. I'm going to go next, I think, to Boise State and New Mexico State New Mexico. Because, look, the Lobos, I think, like Matt, are very good, and they really don't lose at home. So it was surprising to see Boise State come out of there with a win, but it helps when Max Rice goes for 35 points, right, on 7 of 14 3-point attempts. Max Rice can be hot and cold, right? Sometimes he'll put up a few stinkers, but when he's on, he is very much on. And I think that was the deciding factor here in this game against the Broncos and the Lobos. How about Donovan Dent, though? I don't want it to go unnoticed that he went for another 30-point game. He's just going to be really good. He's not going to leave this year or anything for the NBA, but that's an all-conference level player, and hopefully they'll have it back next year for Richard Pitino there.
Yeah, I already talked a lot about the Mountain West and Indiana State, of course, because those were my weekly winners and losers bunched up there. So I'll look at the North Carolina-Duke game, and I want to look at North Carolina and one player in particular that is starting to make this team look like a serious national title contender. Now, I want to take you back to the last time UNC reached the final. Obviously, this was Armando Bacot. This was Caleb Love. RJ Davis was playing well, but Brady Manick stepped up to be the X factor. Now, I do want to preface this. This team also had Leaky Black, and some people forget that Dawson Garcia was on this UNC team. There were a lot of great players on this UNC team. Now, was Dawson Garcia the Dawson Garcia he is this year? No, he also missed a lot of games, so it's not really the same overall statement there. But there was a lot more talent on that team. What this UNC team does have now is Harrison Ingram stepping up to be the X factor that Brady Manick was a few years ago. We didn't see it last year from what UNC had, just a terrible season, honestly. But we're seeing it now, and the Stanford transfer is starting to make this team roll. Him and Bacot combined for 46 points and 23 rebounds in their win over Duke. That's big time. To me, I don't know if Duke is a Final Four caliber team. I haven't really seen enough. They really haven't beaten a lot of great teams, but they're still a good team. And when guys like that for UNC can play like that, that's a statement win.
I mean, I wrote a preview on that game, and I said that the only way that Duke would win is if it's more ugly, because we've seen UNC play in those lower scoring style games before. It's not like they're going to run up the score every single game. They lost to Georgia Tech earlier that week, which I'll talk about in my ACC specific segment. But this was just UNC coming out with a clear game plan. We are going to run down the floor on every opportunity, even made baskets for Duke. They were just beating them down the floor. And that's just if I knew that was how the game would go, I would have had UNC covering that spread, because that's just an athlete mismatch, so to speak. Filipowski was impressive, but when you have everybody on UNC playing the way they do, and then Bacot, how about him? He looked like his dominant self for the first time in a while. He had 25 and 10. That's where UNC is at their ceiling. I think that was maybe their defense could have been a little bit better, but I think that's almost a ceiling performance for UNC right there. I think they showcased on the biggest national stage why everybody is hyping them up. And that's why even after losing to Georgia Tech, they remain 3 in the AP poll. In my personal rankings, I believe they're around there in our CBB review poll, and for good reason. But Ben, I know we have 7 games here, but if you just want to add anything on UNC Duke, because it's that important, and then we'll head over to the last 2 on the screen.
No, I think you covered most of what I would have said. I was going to the game, and I couldn't really come up with a great game plan for how Duke would win necessarily, especially in Chapel Hill. Now, it's a rivalry game, throw all the records out, all that. But I think North Carolina was the better team coming in. They showed exactly what their strengths were and came away with a game that went about how it should have gone. I think that's what we said. You texted me that, Dan, a little bit after the game ended. I do want to talk about Tennessee and Kentucky. I want to talk about both of these games, and I'll let you guys cover both of them after I speak on them real quick. First, on Purdue, Wisconsin, this is exactly how I thought that game was going to go. Wisconsin is just not the type of team that is going to beat Purdue. I don't think. They don't have the necessary explosiveness, especially when AJ Storr struggles. He went just 4 for 15, I believe, was his final stat line. That was sort of their chance. And then Chucky Hepburn only had 6 points. You got to have good guards to beat Purdue and the Boilermakers. So that was not the case there. Shout out to Lance Jones, though. I think a lot of people were scratching their heads about the addition of Jones in the offseason. And, is this really what Purdue needs? I think they need more athletes on the wing, stuff like that, right? But he's been a fantastic player. I think he's exceeded everyone's expectations except for maybe Matt Painter's. So nice pickup for them, finishes with 20 points. And then for Tennessee and Kentucky, obviously the storyline is Kentucky needs to find some defense somewhere. But I am starting to get kind of concerned about their front court scoring. Their guards are amazing. They have been. I mean, this is just a Coach Cal standard, a staple during his time in Lexington. But I think that Trey Mitchell and Justin Edwards have not necessarily lived up to what maybe the expectations were going to be at the beginning of the season, particularly Mitchell. Obviously, Edwards is a 5-star. You don't really know how those are going to pan out all the time. But I was really hoping to see more from Mitchell. He put up a nothing burger in this one. 0 points on 0 for 3 shooting. I thought he would be a lot more impactful offensively in particular. Now, that's not speaking on his defense or anything, but I would like to see at least one consistent scoring option come from Edwards or Mitchell or even Bradshaw or Onyensu, if that's where we're going as well. But it's just something to look at as we move forward into March.
Yeah, 2 quick comments before I'll send it to Matt one last time before we move on. But regarding Purdue, like, you're just not going to beat an elite team with Zach Edey. And then the guards just I think they don't get enough credit. I think a lot of people are still like hanging on to that performance last year against Fairleigh Dickinson. These guards are not just capable of making up for, are capable of taking advantage of all the attention Zach Edey gets. These are legitimately like upper level Big Ten guards. So I think people need to realize and come around on that. And then Tennessee, they have more than one player now. Like, everyone's like, oh, it's just a Dalton Connect show. Well, just Josiah Jordan-James and Zakai Ziegler had 26 points each. I think they proved the critics there wrong. Ziegler also with 13 assists, 26 and 13. That's an incredible night. So what a game that was. Just a fun game. Lots of talent, lots of shot making. Defense a little bit optional, but I really enjoyed that watch.
Yeah, and I think just to piggyback on that real quick before we go ahead and look at the conference takeaways, we have to remember that Zakai Ziegler was injured coming into the season. He was hurt at the beginning of the year. So I don't know when he got back to 100%, but I think that now we do see him at 100%. And I'm sure Dalton Connect kind of had to lift that load, and now he's been hot. Like, why not feed the hot hand? It makes too much sense to keep that guy going. But yeah, other guys are stepping up. And again, the only problem I have with Tennessee doesn't have to do with, they beat Kentucky, so I know they deserve it. They're a good team. But, like, I feel like they're getting a little bit of favoritism in the rankings because when it comes down to it, they've got 5 losses, and they're still sticking in that top 6.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. They've had one of the toughest schedules, but it's open for debate. I could see that take there. But let's do that. Let's go around the conferences. I'm sending it right back to you, Matt. I'm going to send it to your Big East segment, so give us your weekly Big East takeaways.
Well, my takeaways, and I'm going to continue with this, is that UConn continues to show that they're the best team in the Big East, and it might not even be close, honestly. I know that Marquette and Creighton are playing better, and this is a 3-team conference at this point, as far as 3 teams that are elite at the top level of the Big East. But you have now seen UConn win in multiple ways. They won without Donovan Clingan when he was injured and actually not playing, and then he still kind of is getting back, getting his feet under him. Alex Karabin was out in their last game, and it didn't matter. They still won that game. They still were able to find a way, and I think you're just seeing a team with so many pieces that can win in so many ways. But I guess what I do want to look at in the rest of the Big East is that there are a couple mid-tier teams that we still have to pay attention to, and it pains me to say this because I believe that at this point, Xavier and Villanova both have a lot of losses. But those resumes are pretty hard to ignore, and Xavier is now 6-5 in conference, and Villanova picked up a big-time win over Providence. So we need to pay attention to the Musketeers and the Wildcats. I do not believe they are tournament teams. I think that at some point, throw the resume out the window. When you can't prove that you can win more than one every 2 games, you don't deserve to be in the NCAA tournament. But maybe they're going to start catching some fire here on the later end of the Big East schedule.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure I'm in on Villanova. I'm just not impressed by them. Maybe it's just the whole contrast between the Jay Wright and Kyle Neptune, and there could be a healthy balance between perception and what they've done in the past. But I'm not sure I'm in on Villanova, but that's fair. Ben, I'll send it over to you. SEC, what are your takeaways?
Yeah, I'm glad Matt brought up Tennessee's ranking because I do disagree with him. Actually, I think that if you look at who's in the top, so there's Purdue, there's UConn, there's North Carolina. I think those are the top 3 teams, and then there's a pretty sizable gap. And then you get around, and all of a sudden, everyone has 5 losses, right? There is no who are you going to put ahead of Tennessee. I don't have a good answer for you. I do think like Houston, Kansas, Tennessee in some order. I don't really care which order it is. I think it's pretty fair overall. But that's my top 6, and I think there's a pretty sizable gap under there. But let's get into the Southeastern Conference. Ole Miss, like I mentioned before, won the Egg Bowl for the first time, but turned around and gave Auburn their first quad 1 win. So really, Ole Miss the Rebels are doing a great deal for the SEC at this point. I think that Chris Beard has done a pretty good job, 18-4 in his first season. They have a lot of talent on that roster. It was interesting to see how it was going to fit together, but I think he's done a good job there. On the other hand, Mississippi State got crushed by Alabama over the weekend. It wasn't even close. I think they have finally fallen off the, probably a tournament team, but not really ladder. I think they're not going to be in that conversation for much longer, if at all, if they are currently even. South Carolina, I'm glad Dan mentioned this in his winners, but Lamont Paris has done a great job in year 2. That win against Tennessee was one of the more impressive ones I think we've seen so far this season, going on the road and beating the Vols. It helped that no one really showed up outside of Dalton Connect, but probably South Carolina's defense had something to do with that as well. So I want to give credit where credit's due, and then they turn around and get a win against Georgia as well. So real good work on that part. I think Kentucky should be a little bit concerned. Like I mentioned before, there's just what are we going to do when all 3 guards have an off game is my main worry, right? Dillingham, Shepard, and Wagner. I think that's not out of the question, right? Especially against a good defensive team. And their defense just doesn't have the capacity to get over those clunker offensive performances. So that's something to keep an eye on there. And then finally, I want to mention Florida as well. They did have a loss in their most recent game to Texas A&M, which was really frustrating, almost to the level of Creighton and in frustration for me, because you got to win that game. I know it's on the road, but if you're fighting for a tournament spot, you got to win that. But they are on track, I think, to make the tournament at this point. We'll have some more bubble talk later in the episode, but that's sort of where we're at for the SEC.
Okay, and then moving on to the ACC, where I tweeted this out. I've talked about this for a while. I used to find this whole glorified mid-major conference, that whole running joke, kind of funny. I even joined in on the fun, but I think it's gotten to the point where the joke has been made so many times, people actually believe it. So now it's just getting a little annoying. So the ACC is a top 5 conference in college basketball. Let's be real. It's not what everybody's making it out to be. And I think it actually deserves a lot more respect at this point. But let's talk about some game results. So we deep dove into UNC Duke, so I don't need to reiterate that. But isn't it interesting how Georgia Tech, of all teams, was the one to catch UNC? Georgia Tech's not a good team at all. Let's be real. They're 10-12, but they do offer quite a bit of athleticism, especially in their front court, and they could protect the rim pretty well. And then all of a sudden they just could shoot the rock randomly very well on given nights. And I think they were over 40% from 3 against UNC. So a really weird team Georgia Tech is. They could clearly play up to just about anybody, but also they just aren't going to win too many games consistently. They're just, like I said, 10-12. I'm not worried about UNC though, because like I said, they were able to beat Duke a few days later. Let's go to Bubble Watch though, because our Virginia Cavaliers are back. They've won 6 straight. They are starting to figure it out. I think I could talk about UVA for an hour, obviously, but in its most simplest form, I would say Reese Beekman is a stud, and the role players are starting to do exactly what each individual role player is there to do. And that's what's making them win all these games. Going to Clemson on the road and surviving, I don't think it's their most impressive win of the year, but resume-wise, it might help them the most of any wins they've had, looking at it in hindsight. And then in terms of Clemson, they're just enjoying yet another year of the Brad Brownell experience. That's just, I hope you didn't get tricked once again. Like we all saw this coming. A 2-0 week for NC State. They won against Miami. Canes went 1-1. So they play UVA tonight, actually, in a couple hours. If they win, that would go a long way for them. And then finally, Florida State, they're dead again. They looked like they turned it around. They had a rough non-con, and then they played UNC tough. They won a bunch of conference games. Then they played UNC tough. And then what do? They get up 101 points in the loss to Louisville a week later. So if you lose to Louisville, in my book, you're no longer relevant. That's Florida State. Sorry. You tricked me for a little bit, but not anymore. And you're back to irrelevancy. Now we go over out west, back to Pac-12, and a little bit of Mountain West talk.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have to start with the fact that Arizona is clearly above every team in the Pac-12. They've been the only ranked team in the Pac-12 for the past few weeks, and deservingly so. But a big bubble game out in the Pac-12, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about this later, but Colorado and Utah playing. And, I think that we now know one of the teams that we have that's going to be making the NCAA tournament. That's going to be Utah, because to me, they weren't even on the bubble to begin with, but they were kind of trending down. And then they get that win. It kind of helps them up. So I think that saves the Pac-12 a little bit, because it gives another team that looks like they are safely in at the moment. Just don't fall off too much. But the Utes are playing good basketball. I think we need to bring up Oregon, because Oregon was stringing together a ton of wins, a ton of games in a row. And you were kind of thinking, okay, maybe the Ducks can rival Arizona at the top. They have now lost, let's count it, 4 of the last 6 games. All 4 of those on the road. So first off, I see an Oregon team that cannot play on the road to save their lives. But I also see an Oregon team, I kind of let it pass when it was like you're losing by 6 to Colorado and 3 to Utah, like you're in those games. But then they lose at UCLA. And that's the one for me. And the Arizona game was at home. So 3 road losses, but still, losing on the road at UCLA should honestly count as 2 road losses, because the Bruins are just not good at all this season. I know they're playing a little bit better, but right now, Oregon is kind of falling off a little bit, and I think that's bad for the Pac-12. So you've got Utah playing good. That's good for the conference. Oregon going down, and now you're like, oh, yeah, maybe it is a 2-bid league. Washington State's the other team we need to talk about. 3-game winning streak. They're 7-4 in conference. They look legit. This looks like a really good team. I hope they do make the tournament. I know they were on the bubble, but they're starting to get inside the field in most people's bracketologies. And, I mean, that's where I have it, honestly. So much of this Pac-12, you've got 6 teams in the Pac-12 that are 12-10 overall or worse. 5 of those teams, 500 or worse. It's just not a great league, and I'm saddened by that, because going into the year, it looked like there was a lot of talent throughout this league, players that had transferred, and for whatever reason, it's just not working out.
And then any quick words on the Mountain West?
Yeah, I'll be quick on this, especially because I talked about it earlier, but I think we see what San Diego State is still capable of. I feel like it was weird to me that they weren't really on people's radars before, and I think they reminded people why they were in the national championship last year with that convincing win against Utah State. And then we need to talk about Boise State. Boise State is a major player in this Mountain West. Like, they have honestly officially replaced Colorado State inside that top 4. They're kind of rivaling New Mexico still. I think you can, if you want to pick your top 3 of the conference, go either Boise State or New Mexico. Utah State and San Diego State, the clear number 2. But again, a league that's beating up on each other. But it's beautiful to see, because I love Mountain West basketball.
Fair enough. And then Big 12 for Ben. What do you got to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go a little bit bottom to top here. It seems like Oklahoma does this every other season, it feels like, where they get off to a hot start and then immediately lose, 6 of 8 or whatever. They went 0-2 again this week, lost by 20 to Kansas State. They seem to be heading in the wrong direction no matter who's coaching the Sooners. That seems to be a trend. They sort of fall off in February. Of course, it's tough in the Big 12, but that is life here. Cincinnati, I don't get if they're good or not. I can't place it because they go out and they lose to West Virginia, really one of the bottom two teams of the Pac-12, and then they beat Texas Tech, who was leading the conference for a good while and at the top of the standings. I think they're a tournament team. I like a lot of their pieces, but you just can never be sure if they keep going 1-1 around here. How about arguably the game of the week in Iowa State Baylor? What an incredible time to be alive for the people in Waco. Scott Drew gets ejected for the first time in his Baylor career, and he's been there since 2003, which was a crazy incident where he didn't even look like he needed to get ejected. Sort of the ref was walking toward him. Certainly, we've seen coaches do more and not get ejected, so I was surprised he was thrown out of that game. But then at the end, there was 1.5 seconds left, I believe. Baylor had missed a free throw. They were down 2, so Baylor missed a free throw. Iowa State gets the ball, tries to heave it over. It seems like the game's over. Everyone's done. The whistle had blown, and apparently the Baylor had started the clock early, about half a second early. So Iowa State essentially gets a free timeout, and the ball on the sidelines. TJ Altsberger draws up a great play. Milan Momcilovic just shoots it about 0.2 of a second late. He had banked it in. Everyone thought it was in. Iowa State walks that way with a loss. Terrible, terrible scenes for the Cyclones there, but it was a crazy game overall. One last thing here. Houston avoided a bad 0-2 week, I think. First of all, they scraped by Texas. And second of all, I'm just not sure how we missed putting Houston, Kansas on our game picks.
Yeah.
I think that was oversight by all three of us. I'm not sure how. That was probably my bad originally, but usually that doesn't get past my co-host here. So Houston went on the road to the Fog, was favored in the Fog, which almost never happens, and then we found out why no one is ever favored in the Fog when Kansas comes in and destroys them. The Jayhawks finally have a fifth starter in Johnny Furphy. I'm not sure why it took them so long to figure that out. I thought he would look pretty good, especially in Maui, but they kept starting people not named Johnny Furphy. So he finishes with 17. Houston, I'm a little bit worried about their outside shooting. They're always going to be super physical inside, but I just feel like something's missing off this Cougars team. Maybe Terrence Arsenault would have helped this, but he is out for the year, I believe, with a torn ACL, maybe Achilles, something like that. But they could have used a versatile wing like him. So overall, no one has fewer than 3 losses in the conference. It seems like even more of a grind than usual. Maybe that's just because there aren't any dominant teams in the Big 12 this year like there usually are. But, I mean, it's one of the most entertaining leagues, if not the most, in the country.
Yeah, there were a lot of also, to your second to last point, a lot of crazy endings this week. I mean, I talked about it in my losers, and then you just talked about that one. But also, how about nothing to do with who won and who lost, but the final score of, what was it, Purdue and Illinois? Or sorry, Purdue and Northwestern, where it just ended up being 105-96 in a game that was in the final possession. What even happened there? Because I turned it off once I thought the game was over. Do you want to explain? I know, Ben, you know what happened. So
yeah,
that was really weird.
Chris Collins also got ejected. I think it wasn't any certain specific play that got him tossed. It was just a collection of frustration. And I think that the free throw debate is a little bit overblown because Northwestern simply does not draw fouls on offense. That's been a trend. You can look it up throughout their season. And Purdue obviously does draw a lot of fouls, but even then 42-8, I believe, was the free throw differential. It doesn't look great on paper, but if you actually watch the game, I didn't actually think it was terrible. The refereeing, it was not fun to watch, but I don't think it was grossly uneven for one specific side, if that makes sense. Like, they didn't create a fun game to watch, but it wasn't an unfair game. However, Chris Collins gets ejected. He goes and shakes Max Painter's hand, shakes Zach Edey's hand, who's not even paying attention. He'd been out of the game for a little bit, and then pumps up the crowd at Mackey Arena. So not even on his home floor as he's walking out. I think it was the most gregarious ejection I've ever seen, where the Purdue fans didn't even know how to react. They were just sort of cheering. They started booing, and then they sort of gave him a standing ovation as he walked off the court. It was a funny scene, and a good end to a good game, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was just so like confusing to see. Oh, the final scores. Anyway, yeah, 105-96. But yeah, there's more to talk about with my Big Ten takeaways. Again, the game of the week was Purdue, Wisconsin. We discussed that one. What a wild week for Nebraska, though. They did prove their worth. They also beat Wisconsin. And then a bit of a tough overtime loss on the road to Illinois. They definitely could have had that one. Illinois is also a weird case because I feel like they keep finding ways to win games and they have Terrence Shannon back and all that. But is it just me? I'm not overly impressed by their performances. I feel like some regression for Illinois is in the works down the line. It looks like I get nods of approval there. So maybe you guys agree. Also, everyone talks about how mid the ACC is. There are a lot of unimpressive teams in this Big Ten. My favorite to rail on is Indiana, but I mean, Maryland having 5 conference wins, this Maryland team having 5 conference wins, that should say enough about the conference. I don't need, what else do I even say? I mean, I guess I'll end it off with Michigan State, a positive, because they got a pair of comfortable wins. They beat Michigan, which as they should, and then they beat Maryland comfortably, so that they remain in decent position. We might have just overrated them a little bit in the preseason, but they're comfortably sitting on like that, 7 to 9 line-ish, Matt, something like that. So that, I guess that actually segues us perfectly into our bracketology segment that we will be doing until tournament time. Bubble Watch, we're going to I'll give you guys 5 teams, and rapid fire will discuss in or out, not as the season would end today on February 5th, but where we predict on Selection Sunday. So our first team is Colorado. Matt, I'll send it to you first. So Colorado's 15-7 overall, 6-5 in Pac-12 play.
Yeah. First off, we need to, again, talk about how Colorado just lost, so they're moving down a little bit. For me, in my last bracket, and I'm going off of that, I had them as an 11 seed, but this is before the loss to Utah. I haven't totally put my brackets together, but from what I've seen, Colorado is going to be on the outside. Just one quad one win. The last time I put this spreadsheet together, again, I'm not sure if that has changed overall. They've got some pretty good metrics overall, really good in KenPom, but I think there was a lot of bubble teams last week that have started to win. So I think at this moment, Colorado is out, but they would be first 4 out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm with Matt here. Looking towards the end of the season, they just have too many weird losses. Like they lose to Cal and they lose to Arizona State, and they just don't have the opportunity to get those quality wins that sort of offset the types of defeats you can take in the Pac-12. I just don't get how Colorado is not better though. That's my biggest bone.
Yep.
They have Tristan Da Silva. They have Cody Williams, a 5-star recruit. They have KJ Simpson, arguably a first-team All-Pac-12 player. They have Eddie Lampkin, who's a solid big. He's been a solid big for a long time in college. I just don't know how they have all this talent, and it frustrates me that they might end up missing the tournament because of losses to Washington State. Right? It's just you want to see the best teams in.
Yeah, maybe I think it's too late in the season to say, they all of a sudden go on a run and start proving their worth. So I'm going to agree with both of you. I'm going to put Colorado out as well. Next team, same record, Butler, but kind of trending on the other way. 15-7, 6-5 in conference. Butler, I'm going to put them in. This is a tale of 2 teams. First portion of the year, more recent portion of the year. They've been racking up an impressive string of wins lately. They don't really have any bad losses for me to be hesitant about. A lot of these teams we talk about, they have at least one, if not multiple, bad losses. And they're not dominating these games. They struggle to make stops sometimes. But I think, again, I'm looking more at resume than how much I like the team. I think the resume will be strong enough to do the talking. So I got Butler in. What do you guys say, Matt, first?
Yeah, I got Butler in as well. To me, Colorado moves out, Butler moves in, and it's because Colorado lost, Butler just won. And that's how this bubble's kind of playing out these past few weeks. Whoever's hot is moving in. If you lose, you might drop. And Butler had a good win against Creighton that we talked about. That's a great win, a win that Creighton, you can talk about that side for the Blue Jays, that they maybe shouldn't have lost that game. But at this point, we have a Butler team that now has multiple quad one wins. And like you mentioned, no bad losses. So how do you keep a team out that's 15-7, over 500 in a power conference, and they're beating some of the best teams in their conference?
Yeah, I'm a sweep again. Butler has a pair of really good wins from the non-con that we didn't think were going to be good in Boise State and Texas Tech, and then they have a really tough end of the conference. So I think even if they go 5-4, as long as they don't lose to DePaul or Georgetown, they're probably in a comfortable spot heading into the tournament.
All right, let's talk about the Who's 17-5, 8-3. I'll send it right to Ben.
Yeah, I mean the emergence of Jordan Minor has been incredible for the Cavaliers heading in. They were struggling without a post presence, and now they have one. In addition, Jacob Rose has been one of the best shooters in the country for the past month or so. So I think they're finding their stride, like you mentioned before, Dan. They don't have a particularly tough end of the ACC schedule as a whole, but it is pretty backloaded. They do have yet to play Carolina, Duke, or Miami, which they play tonight. I think if they split Carolina and Duke, they're in a pretty good position. If not, it gets a little dicey, but I think they're still in because they're going to have a pretty gaudy record by the end of the ACC play, in my opinion.
Yeah, Matt, you disagree or?
I think that Virginia's going to be in. I mean, to me, resume is huge, right? When you're comparing teams against each other. And I know that there's predictive metrics and all that, but at this moment in time, Virginia has played 22 games and they've only lost 5, and they play in a power conference. That should be zero debate. This team should be in without a doubt. They've won 6 in a row. They're playing hot. Like, you want to get teams, if you're gonna debate, like, hey, let's put a team in that's playing well over a team that's not. Like, they're passing all of those tests. And to me, like, at this moment in time, no doubt Virginia's in. I know it can change, but they're in.
I don't even trust Joe Lunardi anymore. Joe Lunardi was the first to really popularize bracketology, and there's a lot to be said about that. But he's far from the most accurate bracketologist if you look at the numbers. The reason I'm taking a shot at Joe Lunardi right now, I love what he does, but he has UVA outside of his tournament bracket, so I just don't think that's right either. So I have Virginia in as well. Moving on, Memphis. I feel like there's a clear take on this. I don't know if you guys disagree. Memphis 16-6, 5-4 in AAC play. I don't think they're going to make the tournament. They haven't done anything impressive in a long time. They're losing a lot of bad games. Even the games they win, they're just not getting me very excited. They're like barely squeaking on against teams they should blow out. And I just don't think the AAC is strong enough either to bolster their metrics, have them be able to get in with 8-9 losses. So Memphis out for me.
Yeah, I'll take this next. Memphis is in for me, and it's one of those teams that I don't want to put in, but they're passing the test enough. And for me, SOR is a big reason why. Strength of resume right there. They were top 60 in that at my last check. Again, that might have went a couple ways either way, but they're still in pretty good number there. The big thing for me, and again, in a lot of their net rankings, it looks like a team that could be out, but 5-3 on the road. And I know that the American isn't as strong as the power conferences, so that road record isn't the same as like a Big 12 road record. But I think that is important, that Memphis has played well on the road where a lot of these bubble teams have not. I mean, you've got like a team like Wake Forest that wins every game at home but can't win away from their home. And you've seen it like with UCF. They're another example. Winning on the road is important, and that's the key factor for me.
No, that's fair. March Madness isn't played at your own arena. That's a valid point. But Ben, what about you? Break the tie.
I hear everything you said. However, unfortunately, since they lost to Rice, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you lose to Rice, you're wearing the Memphis State uniforms. I don't feel any sympathy. However, I will say they probably have the best chance out of the 5 teams we're talking about to win the auto bid. So that's probably their path to the tournament.
True. I didn't consider that. You're right though. They might be like they're easily top 3 most likely in the conference, and it's pretty close probably with the odds. All right, last team, Cincinnati, 15-7, 4-5. This one's very up for debate. I'm gonna let both of you guys talk first. See if you can convince me one way or the other.
Yeah. I'll take this one first. I'm gonna say out. I see a lot of people have them in right now just because I don't think they're gonna finish above 500 in the Big 12. And for that reason, I just don't feel comfortable saying with certainty that someone that finishes 8-10 or whatever that may be in a power conference has the ability to be called a lock and go into the tournament, especially at this point when they still have to play Houston, Iowa State, TCU, Houston again, Kansas State. You know what I'm saying? Like their schedule isn't the toughest heading out, but they still have to play all of these games, and it leaves a not very wide margin for error, especially if you're going to go and lose to a team like West Virginia. That means I don't really trust you necessarily heading to the end of the season. Give me Cincinnati out.
Yeah, I believe that Cincinnati is in. I think that Cincinnati is that last win. I mean, it gets them to 15-7, top 30 in the net. They're winning on the road as well. They're about 500 on the road, and they're doing it in a Big 12 conference. I think Cincinnati is going to sneak in. They don't always play like a tournament team. Like, I don't know if they really match the eye test all the time, but sometimes the metrics are too hard to ignore, and that's Cincinnati for me.
I don't know. I look more at it. Okay, in most cases I'll give like the 8-10, 9-9 Big 12 teams the benefit of the doubt because of how difficult the conference is. But they also lost both of their local games against teams they could have beaten, Dayton and Xavier is who I'm talking about. And that might be the deal breaker for me. So that might be where the decision breaker is when they reach double-digit losses on the year overall. But that was definitely the toughest one. I don't know what to make of it. So it's something to keep an eye on. We are at the 47-minute mark, so we're going to go really quickly here with our game picks, but we got 7 picks of the week. So let's get going with them. We start on Tuesday night, where this is on Longhorn Network. Iowa State at Texas. I'll send it to Matt first.
Yeah, I've usually picked a lot of the home teams here, and I think I'm going to go with that again because Texas at home just seems like this will be a win for them. I mean, that seems to be a theme through college basketball this year. It's tough to win on the road. Iowa State's been playing great, but Texas has started to play better as well. And I believe that Texas, they'll win this game.
I can't get off Iowa State. I like the Cyclones a lot, and I just think that they have the star power to be able to deal with Texas, and I just don't trust Texas's guards all that much at this point in the season. I thought they were going to be a little bit better than they are, or at least more consistent. So give me the Cyclones, even though it's on the road.
Cyclones as well. Tough to win on the road, the Big 12, but they've been more consistent. Like, I haven't really recalled an Iowa State performance where they just completely don't show up. There's been a lot of times where that's the case with Texas. See our next game. Yeah, I see you, Freddie. We got Samford in our Samford UNCG. That is one of our game picks. We'll get to that in just a second. Game 2, though, Alabama at Auburn. This is Wednesday at 7:00. I'm going. I'm like 0-7 when it comes to picking Alabama games. So I don't know if this is a good thing that I'm picking your team, but I am going to pick Auburn. I think this rivalry ends in a home road split, but I'm not really sure of it. What do you guys have to say? I'll start with you, Matt.
I'm going to go with Bama, and I know I'm going back on what I just said. It's tough to win on the road, but Alabama is 8-1 in the SEC, and somehow I feel like they're still underranked. I think this is the time where Alabama shows what they're made of. Nate Oates has built something there, and Alabama's going to win this game. They're going to improve to 9-1 in the SEC. They got to be a top 10 team pretty soon if they keep winning.
Yeah, since Dan picked Auburn, I'll pick Alabama to save my record a little bit here. I just think that Alabama loses to the absolute elite teams, and they beat everyone else. And Auburn, I don't think is one of those absolute elite teams. I'm talking like top 5, top 6. So for that reason, give me the Crimson Tide.
All right, Samford and UNC Greensboro. Yes, we are talking SoCon. Yeah, this one Thursday night. So I don't know if it's completely standalone, but definitely probably the best game going on in this time window. I'll send it, Ben, if you want to take this one first. I mean, I've strong thoughts on this one, even though the projected lines to pick them, but I'll let you go first.
Yeah, if you like offense, this is the game for you. Samford in particular is elite from outside the arc, shooting over 40% as a team. So I really just I'm a I'm a sucker for offense, which sounds strange coming from a UVA fan, but I really do enjoy a team that can just absolutely light it up. And UNC Greensboro doesn't have that one key stat that makes me look at it and say, hey, this is what I think. You know what I mean? Like this isn't how they win. So I'm not sure what's going to happen here, but I like Samford overall, in my opinion.
But you, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that like UNC Greensboro seems to shoot the three ball pretty well. But I don't know, again, in a game where there's going to be so much offense anyways, like, is that really going to be the difference maker? I'm not sure. But I will say that I've watched Samford twice now, and I did watch them pretty hard one game against Western Carolina because I came into that game saying that Vontarius Woolbright is probably the best player in the SoCon. I really want to watch him. And then a guy named Achora Chor, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Freddie, he started playing and had like a career night that night. And I was like, you know what? We need to start taking Samford seriously because I know Samford traditionally isn't one of the top teams in the SoCon. But at this point, I mean, they've got 20 wins. They're winning a bunch of games. They're beating like the top teams in this conference. And UNC Greensboro just lost to Mercer. This is not the same Mercer team that upset Duke. This is the 10-13 Mercer team that they're not gonna do anything in this league, in this conference tournament. Give me Samford all the way in this one. How is it a pick 'em? I don't really understand that.
Yeah, I'm not picking against a team that not only are they 20-3, they haven't lost a game since November 10th. So I see how this could be a trap one, but they like when you're winning, what is it, 20 out of 21 games or something like that. Like, who am I to say all of a sudden they're going to lose? So definitely we're emphasizing this game because we want you guys to lock in on it. We like mid-major basketball. We talked Missouri Valley last week. I think SoCon takes center stage this week. But yeah, that's my take there. And then we got what we got next here. We've got this one's just weird. Like Gonzaga. Do you guys know the story behind this? Why is Gonzaga playing Kentucky in February?
I do know. Ooh, we might have lost Ben.
Yeah, I think we lost Ben, but
he has the email to get back in anyway, so hopefully he gets back. But I do know the story of this. It's a home and home series, I believe. But I do know that as far as this game being played in February, 100% positive. It's because Gonzaga playing in the West Coast Conference, they wanted to challenge themselves and make sure that they're playing a competitive team, a power conference team, because I think Gonzaga has noticed, like, unless they're going to run the table and win 30 games, a lot of people take into consideration the competition they're playing. And this year, they could really use a February win at Kentucky. I don't know if they're going to get it. So for that reason and the purpose of the game pick, I'm going to end up going with Kentucky in this game. I think they've lost 2 straight. They know that they need to get a win back here, and Gonzaga just hasn't looked great. And we need to talk a little bit, too, about I don't mean to ramble on here, but the student section for Gonzaga. That should have been my loser of the week because that was just terrible. They were throwing trash on the court. That wasn't good. Mark Few, honestly, too, probably should have called them out a little bit more. I've seen coaches do that, and I know he's probably locked in on the game. But, yeah, not a good look. Kentucky's going to win this.
Yeah, I agree. Also, it's just weird because, like, as a metrics person, just the way college basketball functions, as we got Ben back on, like, it's just you're playing a free-for-all schedule for 10 games. Then you isolate yourself into like a 14-ish team pod for 3 months. And like the data gets a little funky trying to compare teams across conferences. This will be like almost like a connector right there. That's a fair point. Like Gonzaga is really going to play up for this game, but I still got Kentucky. Ben, we both picked Kentucky. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm there with you. I mean, Gonzaga has shown me nothing to make me think that they can compete with the top even 25 of the country, especially in the WCC, especially what we saw with St. Mary's. Even though it was a bad like officiated game or whatever, you still win that game despite bad officiating if you're good enough to beat Kentucky.
All right. And then we continue. Baylor at Kansas. I'm picking Kansas. Are they the 4th best team in the country? Maybe not in true talent, but Johnny Furphy, we talked about this the last couple episodes, emerging as an actual 5th player. There have been stretches these past few games where Kansas has just been like they start the game like 10 of 11 for the field or something. It's sometimes just impossible with their starting 5 on the court to stop them. And that's why I think they're explosive enough to get by Baylor at home for sure. 7-point spread. That's a lot. I'll Ben, if you want to go next.
Yeah, typically you need to be an elite team to beat Kansas on the road, and I don't think Baylor's that this year. Unfortunately, I think they're a fun team to watch. I think they're talented, but they're not elite in the same way. So give me the Jayhawks as well.
So if you count Yale, considering they could win the Ivy League, I've counted 8 teams that Kansas has beaten that could be playing in March Madness. Cincinnati's another one. I know they were in our bubble talk, but they just win games. They just win games against the top competition. And we saw it against Houston, that game being at home, this game on the road. Kansas in the Big 12 on the road, 1-3. That lone win at Oklahoma State, losses to UCF, West Virginia, and Iowa State. But guess what? This one's at Allen Fieldhouse. So no brainer. Kansas wins this game.
All right. And then Pac-12, we debated which Pac-12 games to pick, but we'll go Pac-12 next. Let's start with Mountain West, Boise State at Utah State, both going on at Saturday at 10. That's why I got confused there. But Ben, who do you think wins Boise State at Utah State?
Yeah, it's a big matchup for the top 2 teams in the conference standings, and I'm really excited to see this one. I think this is mostly a whoever's at home wins this game. I don't think Max Rice is going to have the same effect that he did against New Mexico, at least not 2 games in a row. So give me the Aggies in Logan.
Yeah, I'm going to take the Aggies in this one too. I mean, Boise State's been playing hot. I really believe that this is the year they finally win a game or 2 in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, depending on draw. You can't really make statements like that until the bracket is revealed. But this game being at Utah State losing that game on the road to San Diego State, I have a feeling they bounce back, get back on track with a win. But I just can't wait. For someone who gets out at 11:30 at night on the weekend, 10 p.m. basketball, that's my thing.
Yeah. I'm actually going to go Boise State. You know what? I'm going Boise State. I know Utah State's been pretty good, but Boise State's just so pesky. They win games on the road. They just went to New Mexico. We talked about that very early on. They went into New Mexico and won, and that was considered impossible. New Mexico had not lost at home in a long time. So why can't they do the same against Utah State, who just showed they're a little vulnerable as well? I'm riding the hot hand with the Broncos, so I'll oppose you too. And then finally, we end off with, that's the Pac-12 game of the week. We decided Arizona at Colorado could be a close one. I'm going with Arizona because although I'm not in love with the Wildcats, I'm more not in love with the Buffs. And Umar Ballo might be back. That's kind of enough for me because that's huge. But I'll go Arizona. What about you, Matt?
I mean, unless Deion Sanders just comes in and hypes this Colorado team up, knowing that they have to get a win like this if they want to get on the right side of the bubble. I just don't know if Colorado has enough. They haven't really proven it lately. We talked about them. We all kind of agreed that they look like a team that is either out or just not looking good at the moment right now. And Arizona is just playing a lot of great basketball, under the radar basketball, because they lost a couple games that maybe they shouldn't have. So I think people started to doubt Arizona, just kind of looping them in with the rest of the Pac-12. But they've quietly been playing some good ball, and I think a win at Colorado will happen, and it'll get people talking about the Wildcats again.
I'll oppose you guys here. I'm going to take Colorado. I think that Arizona has got one more loss in them. Yeah, I see the Vince Carter. I got one more in me. I think this is the road loss that gets them. I think they are a good team. The Wildcats are. I just don't completely trust them, especially on the road in the Pac-12, even though it's not the best Pac-12 we've ever seen in the road in the world. Give me Colorado at home.
All right, and that will do it for our CBB Review Studio podcast, the latest edition. Trying to wrap this up in under an hour. We got 20 seconds to keep that promise. But yeah, you can see our social media scrolling along on the bottom of the screen. Be sure to follow us there. We will be back next weekend, probably Monday because of Super Bowl Sunday, of course, maybe early on Sunday. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and take care.